She followed every rule. She did everything right. But when security stormed onto her flight and forced her off, without explanation, she realized the system was never built to protect her. What happened next? It shook the entire airline industry. Stay with us. This is a fight for justice you won't forget. Before we dive in, let us know. What time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Naomi Caldwell had been up since dawn, her body running on muscle memory as she navigated another long day in the air. She had done this 1,000 times, boarding, welcoming passengers, running safety briefings. Still, there was something about the quiet hum of an airplane cabin before takeoff that always felt grounding. She adjusted the cuff of her uniform, smoothing out invisible creases as she stood near the front of the aircraft, watching the last of the passengers settle into their seats. Her colleague Sasha leaned in with a grin. "Another long one, huh?" Sasha whispered as she fastened the overhead compartment. "Yeah," Naomi sighed, her voice carrying the weight of exhaustion. "But at least it's not a red eye. I'll take a 6-hour flight over an overnight shift any day." Sasha chuckled. "That's what you say now. Wait till we get turbulence over the Rockies." Naomi smirked but didn't respond. She glanced out the small window near the galley where the tarmac shimmered under the late afternoon sun. The Atlanta Hartsfield Airport was alive with movement. Planes taxiing, baggage carts zipping past, ground crews in neon vests coordinating departures. It was a world in constant motion, one she had been a part of for nearly a decade. Flying had always been her passion. Ever since she was a kid, watching planes slice through the sky, she had wanted to be up there. And she had worked hard for it. Long training hours, difficult exams, endless customer service drills. Even now, after years of experience, she knew she had to be twice as good, twice as professional, to get half as much respect. She felt the subtle shift beneath her feet as the aircraft pulled away from the gate. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the engines roared to life. Showtime. As the plane climbed, she moved through the cabin, checking seat belts, handing out napkins, offering a warm smile. She was good at this. It was second nature to her. An older man in first class waved her over. He was impeccably dressed, silver hair slicked back, wearing a watch that probably cost more than she made in a year. "Miss, could you get me another whiskey?" His voice was smooth, but there was a condescension beneath it, the kind she had learned to recognize. "Of course, sir," Naomi said, keeping her tone professional. She returned with the drink moments later, but before she could hand it over, he asked, "How long have you been with Orion Airlines?" "Almost 9 years," she said, placing the glass on his tray. "9 years. You must love it." "I do." He smiled, but it was the kind that made her stomach tighten. "You must be one of the longest-serving attendants here. Not a lot of, people like you in first class, I imagine." There it was. Naomi felt the weight of the words even as she kept her expression neutral. "I serve passengers in all cabins," she said evenly. "Let me know if you need anything else." She turned away before he could respond, the familiar sting of moments like this settling in her chest. It wasn't new. It wasn't even surprising. But it still got to her, no matter how many times she had dealt with it. By the time they landed in New York, the feeling had dulled, pushed to the back of her mind. Another flight, another microaggression, another day. She grabbed her bag and made her way through the terminal, dodging hurried travelers and blinking against the fluorescent lights overhead. She only had a short layover before heading back to Atlanta. Just enough time to grab a coffee at Beacon's Brew, the small cafe she always stopped by whenever she had a break between flights. The place was busy as usual, the smell of roasted beans thick in the air. Naomi ordered her usual, black coffee, no sugar, and found a quiet spot by the window. She watched as the world moved outside, cars lining up at the arrival gates, flight crews weaving through crowds, families embracing after long trips apart. She was just taking her first sip when her phone buzzed. "Dad." She hesitated before answering. "Hey," she said, keeping her voice even. "Naomi." Her father's deep voice carried a note of concern. "How was your flight?" "Long," she admitted, "but nothing I can't handle." Daniel Caldwell exhaled, a sound she recognized as him holding back something. "You sure? You sound tired." I'm fine, Dad. There was a brief silence. Then his voice softened. You know, you don't always have to do this alone. Naomi let out a small breath, pressing her fingers against the bridge of her nose. I know, she said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. She didn't need saving. She had worked too hard to prove she could stand on her own. But as she sat there, the weight of the day settling over her, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something she wouldn't be able to handle alone. Naomi arrived at her gate earlier than usual, her black coffee still warm in her hands. The terminal bustled with travelers dragging suitcases, last-minute announcements crackling through the PA system. It was routine. Just another flight, another day on the job. But that lingering weight in her chest from her conversation with her father hadn't fully lifted. She took a slow breath and shook it off. She had a job to do. The flight to Atlanta was already boarding when she reached the gate. Naomi flashed her employee badge to the agent at the counter, who barely looked up before waving her through. She walked down the jet bridge, adjusting the strap of her overnight bag. Stepping onto the aircraft felt familiar, like slipping into a well-worn rhythm. The scent of recirculated air, the soft hum of engines idling, it was all second nature. Sasha was already inside, checking the overhead bins. Did you grab coffee without me? Sasha teased, nudging Naomi's arm as she passed. You were too slow, Naomi replied with a smirk, taking her place at the front of the cabin. The first wave of passengers filtered in, chatting, stowing bags, settling into seats. Naomi kept an easy smile on her face as she helped an elderly woman lift her carry-on into the overhead bin. But as she turned back toward the entrance, a flicker of something unusual caught her attention. A security officer stood near the jet bridge, speaking in hushed tones with the gate agent. His gaze landed on her for just a second too long before he turned away. Naomi's stomach clenched. She had been flying for years. She had seen security officers near gates before. It wasn't unheard of. But the way this one was looking at her, that was different. The boarding continued, but Naomi kept one eye on the movement outside the aircraft. A second officer had joined the first, both speaking with a man in a dark suit, the gate manager, Richard Hale. Something was wrong. A few moments later, Kenneth Sloan stepped onto the plane. Naomi's breath caught. She had seen him before. Security detail for the airport. A man who walked like he owned every room he entered. His uniform was crisp, his expression unreadable. But she knew that look. It was the look of someone who had already made up his mind. Kenneth stopped just inside the aircraft door, glancing around as if scanning the area. Then his gaze landed on her. Miss Caldwell? His voice was firm, lacking any pretense of courtesy. Naomi squared her shoulders. Yes. I need you to step off the aircraft. A hush fell over the passengers within earshot. Naomi felt every set of eyes shift toward her. She forced herself to stay calm. Is there a problem? We need to check your belongings. Naomi's grip tightened around the handle of her bag. Why? Kenneth didn't blink. There's been a report of suspicious activity. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Suspicious? What did that even mean? Passengers murmured, a few craning their necks for a better look. Naomi could feel their stares, some curious, others already forming their own assumptions. Sasha stepped forward, her voice tinged with concern. She's a flight attendant. This is her flight. Kenneth barely acknowledged her. Miss Caldwell, please step off the aircraft. Naomi glanced at Sasha, then back at Kenneth. She knew what this was. She had seen it play out before, with other people, in different places, under different circumstances. The power move, the public humiliation, the demand for compliance. Her chest tightened, but she nodded. She wouldn't fight. Not here. Not with 100 passengers watching. As she stepped past Kenneth, the murmurs grew louder. A few passengers whispered to each other. A woman in business attire pulled her bag closer to her feet. It was subtle, but she saw it. She always saw it. She walked down the jet bridge with Kenneth on her heels, her breath steady but her hands clenched. Outside in the terminal, she was met by 2 more security officers and Richard Hale, the gate manager. Let's make this quick, Naomi said, her voice even. I have a flight to work. Hale gave her a look that made her stomach drop. A mixture of apology and something colder, something detached. Kenneth nodded at one of the officers. Search the bag. Naomi let go of the strap and took a step back, watching as the officer unzipped her luggage and began rifling through it. Right there, in the middle of the terminal, in front of passengers hurrying past. Her hands itched to snatch the bag back, to tell them they were making a mistake. But she knew better. She had spent a lifetime knowing better. A minute passed, then another. Kenneth folded his arms, his expression unreadable. Finally, the officer stood up. Nothing? Silence. Kenneth's jaw tensed. He glanced at Hale, who shifted uncomfortably. Naomi exhaled slowly, a flicker of vindication rising in her chest. But she wasn't foolish enough to think that was the end of it. She met Kenneth's gaze, her voice steady. "I'd like to board my flight now." Kenneth didn't move. "Miss Caldwell," Hale interjected, his tone careful. "Perhaps it's best if you take the next flight." Naomi's stomach turned. "Excuse me?" "There's been some concern among the passengers," he continued, as if she weren't standing right there. "It might be better for everyone if we avoided further disruptions." Her breath caught. The ground beneath her felt less steady, less real. "Concern among the passengers," she repeated, barely recognizing her own voice. Hale offered a small, thin-lipped smile, the kind that wasn't really a smile at all. "We'll arrange accommodations for you. No trouble, just a minor delay." A minor delay, a humiliation disguised as protocol. She felt the heat rising in her chest, the familiar mix of anger and exhaustion swirling together, but she forced herself to keep her voice calm. "My job is on that plane," she said, each word deliberate. "I have done nothing wrong." Kenneth took a step closer. "We're not saying you have, but we have procedures to follow." Procedures. She could feel the eyes of people walking past, their silent questions hanging in the air. What did she do? Why are they stopping her? She swallowed hard. She had a choice to make. Raise her voice, fight back, make a scene, or walk away, knowing she was being pushed out of her own flight, knowing that nothing she said would change what they had already decided. She lifted her chin. "I'll be filing a complaint," she said, keeping her voice level. Kenneth's expression didn't flicker. "That's your right." Naomi turned away, her hands curled into fists at her sides as she walked toward the terminal seating area. Passengers boarded, the gate agent closed the door, and Naomi Caldwell, flight attendant, professional, rule follower, was left standing there, watching her own flight leave without her. Naomi sat stiffly in the corner of the terminal seating area, her hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles ached. She had been left behind. Her own flight, her own crew, her own job had taken off without her, and she could still hear Hale's carefully measured voice in her head. "It might be better for everyone if we avoided further disruptions." Disruptions. She had worked in this industry for nearly a decade, following every rule, every policy, making herself smaller when necessary, quieter when needed. And still, somehow, she was the problem. She watched the plane disappear down the tarmac, the sinking weight in her chest pressing harder. This wasn't about a misunderstanding. It never had been. Her fingers hovered over her phone screen. She should call someone, her union, her supervisor, her father. But who would listen? She scrolled past her father's contact, her jaw tightening. He would want to step in. He would want to fix this. And maybe for the first time in her life, she didn't want to be saved. She exhaled sharply and pressed Sasha's name instead. The call rang twice before a hushed voice answered. "Naomi?" "Yeah." A pause. Naomi could hear the faint hum of the airplane cabin in the background. Sasha had made the flight. Naomi hadn't. "What the hell happened?" Sasha's voice was edged with concern. "They just said you were pulled for security reasons, and then they closed the door." Naomi swallowed the lump in her throat. "They called it a suspicious activity report." Sasha's sharp intake of breath was immediate. "I know," Naomi cut in, keeping her voice steady. "They searched my bag, found nothing, but I was still taken off the flight." Silence. Naomi could picture Sasha's worried expression, her fingers nervously twisting the bracelet on her wrist like she always did when she was upset. "Do you need me to?" "No," Naomi said quickly. already knowing what Sasha was about to offer. You can't fix this? Another pause. What are you going to do? Naomi let out a slow breath, staring out at the empty gate where her flight had been just minutes ago. I don't know yet. She ended the call before Sasha could say more. She needed space to think. She grabbed her bag, her body moving on autopilot as she walked toward the customer service desk. A middle-aged woman with a weary smile glanced up. Flight issue? The agent asked. You could say that. Naomi forced a polite expression. I need to know my options. The woman typed something into her computer, her nails clicking against the keys. I see you were removed from Flight 3820. I can rebook you on the next available. No, Naomi cut in, surprising herself with the firmness of her voice. I need to know if a report was filed against me. The agent hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. I don't have access to that information. Then who does? The woman gave a small sigh, glancing at the line forming behind Naomi. Security handles reports like that. You'd have to file a request. Naomi clenched her jaw. Of course, a request. More bureaucracy, more waiting. She could feel the tightness in her chest turning into something else now, something sharper. Anger. She had spent her entire career following the rules, making sure she never gave anyone a reason to doubt her professionalism, her competence, her right to be here. And it hadn't mattered. She turned on her heel, marching away from the desk before the woman could say anything else. Her feet carried her through the terminal, past the coffee shops, the newsstands, the hurried travelers who had the privilege of moving freely. She spotted a security officer near a restricted access checkpoint and made a beeline toward him. Excuse me, she said, keeping her voice level. I need to speak to someone about a security report filed against me. The officer, a tall man with tired eyes, blinked at her. What's your name? Naomi Caldwell. He nodded, speaking into his radio. A few moments later, another uniformed officer emerged from a nearby hallway, and Naomi's stomach dropped. It was Kenneth Sloan. His lips curled into a polite, but entirely insincere smile. Miss Caldwell, I was wondering when I'd see you again. She felt the same uneasy chill she had when he first stepped onto the plane. You filed a report on me, she said, refusing to let her voice waver. Kenneth tilted his head slightly, as if amused by her boldness. I responded to a report. I didn't file it. Naomi narrowed her eyes. Then who did? He shrugged as if it were the least important detail in the world. Anonymous passenger complaint. Said you were acting suspiciously. Her hands curled into fists. Suspicious how? Kenneth folded his arms, studying her for a moment before replying. Wouldn't you like to know? The casual cruelty in his voice made Naomi's skin crawl. She forced herself to take a steady breath. He wanted her rattled. He wanted her to lose control, so she didn't. I want a copy of the report. Kenneth smiled again, but this time there was something colder in it. You can request one through the proper channels, he said smoothly. Of course, that can take a few weeks. Naomi felt her pulse thrum in her ears. Everything about his stance, his tone, his deliberate stonewalling. It was meant to send a message. You don't belong here. You don't get to question us. But Kenneth had made one miscalculation. He assumed she would back down. Naomi lifted her chin. Then I'll wait. His smile faltered just slightly, but it was enough. She wasn't going anywhere. Naomi sat in one of the hard plastic chairs near the security checkpoint, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She could feel Kenneth watching her from where he stood near the restricted access doors, pretending he wasn't paying attention. She wasn't going to leave, not until she had answers. The Atlanta Hartsfield terminal buzzed around her, families reuniting, business travelers rushing to their next gate, pilots walking with purpose. Life moved forward for everyone else, but Naomi had been forced to stop. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. She pulled it out and sighed. Dad. She hesitated. If she answered, he would hear the tightness in her voice, the restrained frustration just beneath the surface. And she knew exactly what he would say. Why didn't you call me sooner? So she let it go to voicemail. Instead, she typed out a quick message to Sasha. Still at the airport. They're making me wait. Let me know when you land. She sent it and tucked her phone away just as a uniformed officer, not Kenneth this time, but someone younger with a kinder face, approached her. "Miss Caldwell." She stood. "That's me." The officer motioned for her to follow him down a side hallway. Naomi glanced toward Kenneth, catching the slight smirk on his face. He thought he had won. He had no idea she was just getting started. The small security office was sterile, functional. Gray walls, a metal desk, a filing cabinet shoved into the corner. The young officer gestured toward the chair opposite his. "Have a seat." Naomi sat, keeping her posture straight. "What's your name?" He blinked, as if surprised she'd asked. "Officer Reynolds." She nodded. "I need to see the report that was filed against me." Reynolds shifted slightly, glancing at the computer monitor. "It's not that simple. I know the process," she interrupted. "I know my rights. I also know that an anonymous passenger report isn't standard protocol for removing an employee from their own flight. So I'm asking again, who filed it?" Reynolds hesitated, then exhaled. "We don't get names if the complaint is marked as anonymous. It came through the airline's security portal." "That's all I can see." Naomi clenched her jaw. "You're telling me that anyone can file a complaint, say whatever they want, and security just acts on it without verifying anything?" He hesitated. "In some cases, this case." Reynolds looked at her, really looked at her, and Naomi saw the conflict flicker across his face. He knew something was wrong. She leaned forward slightly. "If I were a white flight attendant, would we be having this conversation right now?" The muscle in Reynolds' jaw twitched. He didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. Naomi sat back, exhaling slowly. "I'd like to file a formal complaint." Reynolds nodded, reaching for a form on his desk. "I can start that process for you." She pulled out her phone. "And I'd like to record my statement." This time his brows lifted in slight surprise. "That's within your rights." She pressed record before he could second-guess it. "This is Naomi Caldwell," she said, her voice steady. "I am a flight attendant for Orion Airlines. On today's date, I was removed from my assigned flight due to an anonymous, unverified complaint that led to an unnecessary security check. My personal belongings were searched in public view, and despite no wrongdoing on my part, I was denied re-entry to my aircraft. I am formally requesting the name of the individual who filed the complaint and the justification for my removal. I am also filing a report on the conduct of Security Officer Kenneth Sloan, who has refused to provide any transparency regarding the nature of the complaint." She ended the recording and set the phone down. Reynolds took a slow breath. "I'll attach that to your case file." "Good," Naomi said, "because this isn't over." By the time she left the security office, her phone had another missed call from her father. She finally gave in and dialed him back. It barely rang once before he answered. "Naomi." "Dad," she sighed. "You didn't call me," Daniel Caldwell said, his voice tight with restraint. She rubbed her temple. "I was dealing with it." "You were dealing with it?" His voice dropped, the tone that had once been reserved for lectures when she was a teenager, sneaking in past curfew. "Naomi, I had to find out from one of my officers that you were being questioned by security at my own airport." She closed her eyes. "I didn't want you to step in." Silence. Then softer. "Why?" "Because I wanted to prove I could handle it. Because I didn't want them to think I only have this job because of you. Because I knew if you walked in there, Kenneth would have cowered, but I would have never known if I could have won on my own. I just needed to do this myself," she said finally. Her father exhaled, a sound heavy with something she couldn't quite name. "Where are you now?" he asked. "Still at the airport." A pause. "Are you okay?" Naomi looked around the terminal, at the people moving on with their day as if nothing had happened. "I will be." Her father didn't press her further. He knew her well enough to know she wasn't ready to talk about it yet. "Let me know if you change your mind," he said simply. "Yeah," she murmured. "I will." She hung up, staring down at her phone for a long moment. Then she opened her email and began drafting her next move. If Orion Airlines thought she was just going to accept what had happened, they were dead wrong. Naomi sat in a quiet corner of the airport, the low hum of conversations and distant flight announcements filling the space around her. The email on her screen glowed back at her, every word carefully measured, every sentence a direct challenge. 2. Orion Airlines Employee Relations Subject. Formal complaint regarding unjust removal from flight. She read it one more time before hitting send. It was done. She had put it in writing. Now she had to wait. But Naomi had never been good at waiting, especially when she knew the system wasn't built to work in her favor. Her phone buzzed. Sasha. We just landed. Where are you? Naomi exhaled, rubbing her forehead before replying. Still here. I'll meet you at baggage claim. She pushed herself up, rolling her shoulders, trying to shake off the lingering frustration. The airport felt different now, like she was walking through a place that had already decided she didn't belong. The automatic doors slid open as she stepped into the arrivals area. Travelers reunited with loved ones, dragging suitcases and sharing quick hugs before disappearing into the city. Sasha was easy to spot, her Orion Airlines duffel slung over her shoulder, a concerned expression already forming. What the hell happened? She asked the second Naomi was close enough. Naomi let out a short, humorless laugh. You want the short version or the version where I almost got thrown out of my own job because some random passenger thought I looked suspicious? Sasha's face darkened. They actually said that? They didn't have to. Naomi sighed. They called it an anonymous complaint. That was enough. Sasha shook her head. This is insane. What did security say? They wouldn't tell me who filed it, Naomi said. Kenneth was... She clenched her jaw. You know what? I'm tired of saying his name. Sasha frowned. You mean that smug bastard from the gate? Yeah, that one. Sasha let out a frustrated breath. Naomi, this isn't right. You know that, right? They can't just... They can, Naomi said, her voice quieter now. And they did. Sasha folded her arms, shifting her weight onto one foot. So what's next? Naomi glanced at her phone, where the confirmation of her sent email stared back at her. I filed a complaint with Orion, she said. Now I wait and see if they actually do anything about it. Sasha gave her a skeptical look. And if they don't? Naomi's stomach tightened. That was the real question, wasn't it? If Orion did nothing, if they buried this the way companies always did when it was easier to protect themselves than to acknowledge the problem, what was she willing to do next? Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. I'm not letting this go, she said. Sasha studied her for a moment, then nodded. Well, whatever happens, she said, you're not doing this alone. Naomi felt something in her chest ease. Just a little. But she knew this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every time she had been told to ignore it. Every moment she had swallowed the anger, forced a smile, let things slide because making noise could cost her more than just her dignity. Not this time. She wasn't going to disappear. She wasn't going to let them pretend this never happened. And whether Orion Airlines wanted to or not, they were going to listen. Naomi sat at her kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her, the glow of the screen casting a faint light against the dim apartment. She had read the email 4 times now, but the words didn't change. To Naomi Caldwell, from Orion Airlines Employee Relations. Subject: Response to Complaint Submission. Dear Ms. Caldwell, we have reviewed your recent complaint regarding the events of your scheduled flight. After a thorough internal review, we have found that the security measures taken were in accordance with standard protocol. While we regret any inconvenience caused, our policies prioritize passenger safety, and our team acted accordingly. At this time, Orion Airlines will not be taking further action regarding this matter. Sincerely, Orion Airlines Employee Relations. Naomi let out a slow breath, forcing herself to stay calm. She should have seen this coming. The language was so carefully constructed, polite enough to sound professional, vague enough to absolve them of any responsibility. They weren't going to acknowledge what happened. They weren't going to do anything. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could reply, demand a real explanation, push harder. But deep down, she already knew what would happen next. If she kept pressing, they'd bury her in red tape. She would spend weeks, months, waiting for further review, only for them to come back with another scripted response, another empty apology. And in the meantime, they'd be watching her. Naomi had seen it happen before. Colleagues who made too much noise suddenly found themselves written up for minor infractions, their schedules mysteriously cut back, promotions slipping through their fingers. They wouldn't fire her outright. That would be too obvious. They would make her quit. Her phone vibrated against the table, snapping her out of her thoughts. Dad. She hesitated, then picked up. Naomi. His voice was calm, steady, but she knew better. He had already read the email. Yeah, Dad, she said, keeping her tone neutral. A pause, then, this isn't over. Naomi rubbed her temple. They don't want to fight this. They don't want to fight it, Daniel corrected, because they think you won't fight it either. She exhaled. I know how these things work, Naomi, he continued. They expect you to let it go. They expect you to be afraid of pushing back too hard because they can make your life difficult. Yeah, well, Naomi muttered. They'd be right about that last part. Another pause. Then his voice softened. What do you want to do? Naomi stared at the email again, the words blurring together. She could drop it, take the loss, move on. Or she could make sure everyone knew what Orion Airlines had done. Her father, as if reading her mind, spoke again. You don't have to take this on by yourself, Naomi. She closed her eyes. I know, she murmured. But when she opened them, she had already made up her mind. The next morning, Naomi sat across from Tina Vasquez at a small cafe in downtown Atlanta. Tina was a journalist, but not the kind that played it safe. She had built her career exposing corporate misconduct, racial discrimination, and the quiet injustices that companies hoped no one would notice, and she was already taking notes. Naomi had barely finished recounting what had happened before Tina leaned forward, her expression sharp. You know what this is, right? Naomi met her gaze. Yeah. Tina tapped her pen against the table. You ready to go on record? Naomi hesitated. She thought about Orion, about the way they would retaliate. But then she thought about the passengers whispering at the gate, Kenneth's smirk, the way she had been forced off her own flight like a criminal. She lifted her chin. Yeah, she said. I'm ready. Tina nodded. Good. Because once this story got out, Orion Airlines wouldn't be able to ignore her anymore. Naomi sat in her car, parked a few blocks from the airport, her hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. The cafe meeting with Tina had ended over an hour ago, but her heart was still pounding. The weight of what she had just done was settling in. She had gone on record. She had told her story to a journalist known for exposing corporate injustice, and now it was out of her hands. Her phone vibrated in the cup holder. She glanced at the screen. Sasha. She hesitated before answering. You did it, didn't you? Sasha's voice came through before Naomi could say anything. Naomi let out a slow breath. Yeah, I talked to her. A pause, then, oh, damn, Sasha muttered. You're really doing this. Yeah, Naomi said, her throat tight. I guess I am. Sasha exhaled. Okay, what's the plan now? Naomi glanced out the window, watching the stream of cars moving past on the main road. I wait, she said, and then I see how hard Orion tries to bury me. The article hit the internet faster than Naomi expected. By the next morning, her name was everywhere. Orion Airlines faces allegations of racial profiling flight attendant pulled from plane without cause. Airline dismisses complaint. I was treated like a criminal. Naomi Caldwell speaks out. Naomi scrolled through the headlines, her stomach flipping between nausea and adrenaline. The article was thorough. Tina had made sure of that. It detailed everything. The anonymous report, the public bag search, the airline's refusal to take action, and then the part Naomi hadn't expected. Other employees had come forward, anonymous testimonies from other black flight attendants recounting similar stories, being pulled aside for random checks, being questioned about their credentials more than white coworkers, subtle but undeniable patterns of discrimination. Naomi stared at the screen, her chest tightening. This wasn't just about her. It never had been. Her phone rang. She didn't even check the name before answering. Naomi! Her father's voice was steady, but she could hear the weight behind it. She swallowed hard. You read it? I did. Silence then. I'm proud of you. Her eyes burned. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that, but the moment was short-lived, because within hours the retaliation started. Orion Airlines released a statement by noon. We take allegations of discrimination seriously and are committed to fostering an inclusive work environment. However, after an internal review, we have found no evidence that Ms. Caldwell was treated unfairly. Security measures were followed according to policy, and we stand by our decision. Naomi read it 3 times. They were doubling down, pretending her experience didn't matter, pretending the testimonies from other employees didn't exist. Her hands trembled as she refreshed her email. And there it was, a message from Orion's HR department. Subject, immediate administrative review. She already knew what it was before she opened it. They were coming for her job. She had expected this, but that didn't make it any easier. Her phone buzzed again. Another incoming call. Tina. Naomi exhaled sharply and answered. They're retaliating, Tina said, no hesitation. I just spoke to a source inside HR. They're trying to build a case against you. Something about unprofessional conduct. Naomi let out a bitter laugh. Right, because talking to the press is unprofessional, but pulling me off my own flight based on nothing is just company policy? Tina didn't laugh. Naomi, listen to me. They're not just trying to discredit you. They're trying to scare you. Make you back off before this story gets bigger. Naomi's grip on the phone tightened. They're too late. Tina was quiet for a second. Then, good, she said, because you've got people listening now, and they're paying attention. Naomi hung up and closed her laptop. She had fought too hard, swallowed too much, spent years making herself smaller to fit into a system that was never built for her. But not anymore. Orion Airlines wanted a fight. Then they were about to get one. Naomi sat on the edge of her couch, her laptop open in front of her, the Orion Airlines HR email still glowing on the screen. Immediate administrative review. The words felt like a warning, a corporate threat dressed up as protocol. She had expected this, but knowing it was coming didn't make it sting any less. Her mind raced through the possibilities. They could suspend her, dock her hours, put her on probation. And if they really wanted to make an example out of her, they'd fire her outright. Her stomach turned at the thought. Flying wasn't just a job. It was the life she had built, the life she had earned. And now, because she dared to tell the truth, they were trying to rip it away. Her phone vibrated. Sasha, Naomi answered, bracing herself. They just sent out a company-wide memo, Sasha said, skipping the greeting. About you. Naomi closed her eyes. What does it say? They're calling it a review of internal conduct and warning employees against speaking to the press about sensitive company matters. Naomi let out a bitter laugh. Of course. This is damage control, Sasha continued. They're trying to make sure no one else speaks up. Will it work? A pause. I don't know, Sasha admitted. People are scared, Naomi. Naomi understood. She really did. Most of her co-workers couldn't afford to lose their jobs. They had mortgages, kids, student loans, and Orion knew that. She swallowed the frustration rising in her throat. I don't blame them, she said finally. I hoped I wouldn't be the only one out here. Sasha hesitated. You're not alone. But it felt that way. The entire day, Naomi had been refreshing her inbox, waiting for someone inside Orion to step up, to say something, to push back. But the silence was deafening. I need to go, Naomi murmured. You sure? Yeah. Naomi ended the call and sat there, staring at nothing, the weight of it all pressing down on her. Was she making a mistake? She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much to let them take this from her. But if they fired her, if they blacklisted her from the industry, what if this fight cost her everything? Her eyes flicked to her laptop screen. The HR email was still open. She exhaled sharply, pushed her fear down, and clicked reply. The next morning, Naomi sat across from Orion Airlines' corporate review board, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The room was sterile. Beige walls, glass table, a few uninspired pieces of corporate artwork hung at just the right height to seem expensive. 3 executives sat in front of her, their expressions unreadable. The woman in the center, Marianne Foster, adjusted her glasses and spoke first. Ms. Caldwell, do you understand why you're here? Naomi met her gaze evenly. I have a pretty good idea. Marianne nodded as if she had expected that answer. The company has concerns regarding your recent public statements, she said, choosing her words carefully. By speaking to the press, you violated the company's confidentiality agreement. Naomi forced herself to remain calm. I spoke about my personal experience. I didn't reveal company secrets. The man on the left, James Holloway, leaned forward slightly. You made claims that damaged the company's reputation, he said. Naomi let out a short laugh. So my experience damages Orion's reputation, but Orion's actual actions don't? James's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Marianne interlocked her fingers. Ms. Caldwell, we are offering you an opportunity to correct this situation. Naomi tilted her head. What does that mean? Marianne pushed a document toward her, a formal retraction. If Naomi signed it, she would be admitting that her accusations were exaggerated, that she had misinterpreted events, that Orion Airlines had done nothing wrong. She would keep her job, but she would lose everything else: her credibility, her dignity, the truth. She stared at the document for a long moment. Then, without breaking eye contact, she pushed it back across the table. I'm not signing that. The room went silent. Marianne sighed as if disappointed, as if Naomi was a child refusing to apologize. James leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Then you're leaving us with no choice. Naomi's stomach twisted. Here it comes. Marianne folded her hands. Effective immediately, you are suspended without pay pending further review. Suspended, not fired, not yet. They were testing her, seeing if she would break, if she would back down. She took a slow breath, letting the weight of the moment settle. Then she stood, smoothing her blazer as she did. I'm sure you'll find the review process very interesting, she said, her voice steady, and with that she walked out. She barely made it down the hallway before she pulled out her phone. She had a message from Tina Vasquez. Call me ASAP. Naomi exhaled, then dialed. Tina picked up instantly. Naomi, the story just got bigger. Naomi frowned. What do you mean? Tina's voice was charged with energy. I just got confirmation. There's another Orion employee coming forward, and they're willing to go public. Naomi stopped walking. Someone else was speaking up. She wasn't alone anymore. Her grip on the phone tightened. Who? Tina hesitated. Then, your captain. Naomi's eyes widened. Captain Eric Sullivan. He had been the pilot of her flight, the one she was removed from, and now he was stepping into the fire with her. Naomi felt something shift in her chest. This fight wasn't just hers anymore. She straightened her shoulders, her fear melting into something stronger. Orion Airlines had tried to silence her, but now they were about to lose control of the story completely. Naomi paced her small apartment, phone pressed to her ear, trying to process what Tina had just said. Eric Sullivan, she repeated, still struggling to believe it. Yes, Tina confirmed. Your captain. He reached out to me early this morning, said he wanted to talk. Naomi ran a hand through her hair. This changed everything. If a pilot was willing to go on record, Orion Airlines couldn't just brush this off as a disgruntled employee making noise. Captains carried weight. They were the face of every flight. They're going to come after him, Naomi murmured. Tina sighed. Probably, but he knows that, and he still wants to do this. Naomi sat down on the edge of her couch, exhaling slowly. Did he say why? A pause. Then, he said he saw everything that happened at the gate, and he regrets not saying something sooner. Naomi closed her eyes for a second. She had spent days feeling like she was screaming into the void, like no one else wanted to risk their career for the truth. And now here was her captain, someone who could have ignored it, who had nothing to gain by stepping up, deciding to take that risk. Naomi's throat felt tight. When is he speaking out? Tonight, Tina said. He's doing an on-air interview with Channel 5 News. I told him you should be there too. Naomi's pulse jumped. Wait, me? Tina's voice was firm. Yes, you. This is your story, Naomi. You started this fight, but now it's bigger than you, and you need to stand in it. Naomi swallowed hard. The entire city would see this interview, maybe even the entire country. This wasn't just an article anymore. It wasn't just tweets and corporate statements. It was real. It was public. And Orion Airlines wouldn't be able to hide behind vague HR emails after this. Naomi took a deep breath. She had made her choice the second she refused to sign that retraction. Okay, she said, I'll be there. That night, Naomi sat in a studio waiting room, the glow of the news station's monitors flickering on the walls. Captain Eric Sullivan sat beside her, his hands clasped together, his expression calm, but she could see the tension in his jaw. He was nervous. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. Eric let out a slow breath. "I should have spoken up at the gate. Instead, I let them take you off that flight, and I didn't say a damn thing." Naomi held his gaze. "You didn't file that report against me." "No," Eric admitted, "but I didn't stop them either." The weight of his words settled between them. "Orion will come after you," Naomi said softly. "They'll call you a troublemaker. They'll try to make it look like you're just backing me for some personal reason." Eric gave a humorless chuckle. "Let them. I've been in this industry for 20 years. I know what's right, and this wasn't it." Before Naomi could say anything else, a producer stepped into the room. "Ms. Caldwell, Captain Sullivan," she said, adjusting her headset. "We're ready for you." Naomi's pulse kicked up, but she nodded, standing alongside Eric as they followed the producer down the hall. When they entered the brightly lit news studio, Naomi knew there was no turning back. The anchor, Rachel Monroe, wasted no time. "Captain Sullivan," she said, looking straight at him, "you were the lead pilot on the flight that Naomi Caldwell was removed from. Why are you speaking out now?" Eric's jaw tightened slightly before he answered. "Because I saw what happened," he said, "and it wasn't right." Naomi listened as Eric laid it all out, calmly, methodically. He described how Kenneth had spoken to the gate agent before boarding, how security had walked straight onto the plane and gone straight for Naomi. "I've seen security checks before," he said, "but not like this. This wasn't random. This was targeted." Rachel turned to Naomi. "Ms. Caldwell, you filed a complaint with Orion Airlines. They dismissed it, saying that proper procedures were followed. What's your response to that?" Naomi took a slow breath, steadying herself. "My response," she said, "they followed procedures that allowed them to remove an employee from her own flight based on an accusation that was never verified. That's the problem." Rachel nodded. "And now, you're suspended." "Yes," Naomi said, the weight of it pressing against her ribs. "And I believe it's retaliation for speaking out." Rachel turned to the camera. "We reached out to Orion Airlines for a response. They declined to comment but issued a statement saying they do not condone discrimination in any form and that all security concerns are handled by proper authorities." Naomi kept her expression neutral, but inside she burned. "Ms. Caldwell," Rachel continued, "why did you decide to take this public?" Naomi looked straight into the camera. "Because this doesn't just happen to me. It happens to people who don't have the power to fight back. And if I didn't say something, it would happen again. It still will. Unless we change something." Rachel nodded, then turned back to Eric. "Captain Sullivan, what do you think needs to change?" Eric exhaled. "Accountability." "And what do you hope comes from speaking out?" Eric glanced at Naomi, then back at the anchor. "I hope Orion Airlines realizes that their employees deserve better than this." The studio went silent. Then Rachel looked into the camera. That was Captain Eric Sullivan and flight attendant Naomi Caldwell. Their story is gaining national attention. And as of this evening, at least 3 additional Orion Airlines employees have come forward with similar experiences. This conversation is just beginning. The red light on the camera blinked off. And just like that, it was done. Naomi felt her heart pounding. Eric turned to her. "You okay?" She swallowed, nodding. "Yeah." Rachel shook their hands, offering a quiet thank you, before the producer led them back toward the hallway. Naomi pulled out her phone as they walked, her hands slightly unsteady. Her screen was blowing up. Texts, calls, emails. She opened her Twitter feed, and there it was. Justice for Naomi trending. Her breath caught. Eric glanced at her screen. "Looks like people are listening." Naomi looked up, meeting his gaze. "Yeah," she murmured. And for the first time since this started, she believed it. She wasn't alone. She wasn't invisible. And Orion Airlines? They had just lost control of the narrative. Naomi barely slept that night. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts, emails, missed calls. Her Twitter mentions were a battlefield, a mix of support and attacks. Some people were furious on her behalf. Others accused her of playing the victim. If she followed the rules, there wouldn't have been an issue. She's just trying to get attention. Another race baiter looking for a payday. Orion Airlines did the right thing. We can't have safety risks on flights. Naomi gritted her teeth as she scrolled. They were calling her a safety risk because someone had filed an anonymous complaint, because someone had decided she looked suspicious, and now complete strangers had decided she deserved what happened. She shut off her phone and buried her face in her hands. She had expected this. She just hadn't realized how heavy it would feel. A knock at her front door jolted her upright. She glanced at the time, 7:12 a.m. Too early for casual visitors. Cautiously, she moved to the door and peered through the peephole. Her stomach dropped. Two men in suits. She took a slow breath, steadying herself, then opened the door just enough to see them. "Ms. Caldwell?" The taller one, mid-50s, neatly trimmed beard, spoke first. She kept her face unreadable. "Who's asking?" He pulled out a badge. Legal counsel, Orion Airlines. Her pulse kicked up, but she didn't let it show. "We'd like to have a conversation," he said smoothly. "About what?" "Your employment status." She folded her arms. "Pretty sure you already made that decision when you suspended me." The second man, younger, barely 40, forced a smile. "We think there may be a way to resolve this without further escalation." Naomi stared at them. They were here because Orion was panicking. They hadn't cared when she filed her initial complaint, hadn't cared when she was pulled from her flight, hadn't even cared when she was suspended. But now she was trending. Now people were watching. Now they wanted to talk. She let the silence stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable. Then she stepped aside. "Fine," she said, "but I want my lawyer present." 30 minutes later, Naomi sat across from Orion's legal team in her living room, arms crossed, expression neutral. To her right, Ella Chen, her lawyer, scrolled through her tablet, looking completely unimpressed. Ella had been furious when Naomi called her that morning. She had been waiting for this moment. The bearded lawyer, Michael Holloway, cleared his throat. "Let's get to the point," he said. "Orion Airlines wants to offer you a settlement." Naomi felt her jaw tighten. "They want me to go away." Michael's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "We want to move forward in a way that benefits everyone." Ella se inclinó hacia adelante. "Define benefits." The younger lawyer, Mark Harris, slid a folder across the table. $250,000, he said. "If Ms. Caldwell signs a non-disclosure agreement and formally retracts her statements about Orion Airlines." Naomi felt like she had been punched in the chest. They were willing to pay her to erase everything. Her silence was worth $250,000. Ella picked up the document, skimming the pages. Her expression didn't change. "You think this is going to make the problem disappear?" she asked. Michael sighed. "Look, we're all professionals here. Ms. Caldwell has drawn a lot of attention to herself, and that's created challenges for the company. This agreement allows everyone to move forward without further damage." "Damage?" Naomi let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "You mean the damage you caused when you let me get pulled off my own flight?" Michael kept his expression cool. "Ms. Caldwell, you let them humiliate me. You let them suspend me for speaking out. And now, because people are paying attention, you suddenly want to negotiate?" Michael spread his hands. "That's how these things work." Naomi gritted her teeth. Of course it was. This wasn't about justice. It was about control. Orion wanted to control the story. Control her. Ella placed the document back on the table with a soft thud. "No deal," she said. Michael exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Ms. Caldwell, I don't think you understand." "I understand perfectly," Naomi cut in. "You want me to take the money and disappear. You want me to shut up so you can pretend none of this ever happened." Mark shifted uncomfortably. "That's not what we're saying." "That's exactly what you're saying." Naomi's voice was firm now. "You think I'll walk away because I'm scared. And yeah, I was scared. I am scared. But you know what? I'm more pissed off than I am scared." Michael's mouth thinned. "Then you're making a mistake." "No," Naomi said. "I'm making history." She stood. Ella stood with her. "This conversation is over," Ella said, smoothing her blazer. "And if Orion tries to retaliate again, we'll see you in court." Michael exhaled through his nose. "Ms. Caldwell, please think carefully about—" But Naomi was already walking toward the door. She opened it and turned back to them. "See yourselves out." Then she walked away, leaving them sitting there. Naomi stood in her bedroom, her hands pressed against her dresser, her heart still pounding. They had tried to buy her off. They had expected her to fold. She felt electric, terrified, exhilarated. This wasn't just a corporate dispute anymore. This was a battle, and Naomi Caldwell wasn't backing down. Her phone buzzed. She picked it up. A message from Tina. "Naomi, check the news. Orion's board is meeting. They're in full panic mode." Naomi let out a slow, steady breath. Good. They should be. Naomi sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand. Breath steady, mind racing. Tina's message replayed in her head. Orion's board is meeting. They're in full panic mode. She tapped on the news app, scanning the headlines. Orion Airlines board calls emergency meeting amid discrimination allegations. Flight attendant Naomi Caldwell rejects settlement offer. Legal battle looms. More employees speak out. This is bigger than one incident. Naomi's stomach tightened as she clicked on the latest article. It wasn't just her anymore. Two more Orion employees had come forward publicly, both with stories strikingly similar to hers. Random searches, unjustified interrogations, subtle punishments disguised as protocol. And then, the biggest revelation yet. Captain Eric Sullivan had provided internal emails from Orion's leadership discussing how to handle controversial incidents involving employees of color. Naomi felt the air leave her lungs. It was all there. Orion executives discussing how to avoid bad optics, suggesting that diversity complaints be managed quietly to prevent media exposure. They hadn't just ignored discrimination, they had strategized around it. Her phone rang, snapping her out of her thoughts. Tina. Naomi picked up. "You saw it." Tina's voice was breathless, urgent. "Saw it," Naomi confirmed. "Are the emails real?" 100%. Sullivan's source inside corporate verified them. Naomi ran a hand through her hair. "So what happens now?" Tina didn't hesitate. "Now? Orion Airlines has a PR nightmare on their hands. They can't spin this. The emails prove they knew exactly what they were doing." Naomi let that sink in. They had been so sure they could bury her, so sure they could buy her silence. And now, they were the ones scrambling. Tina continued, her tone sharp. "Listen, I'm getting word that some of their shareholders are furious. They're pushing for leadership changes." Naomi blinked. "You mean—" Tina interrupted. "They're talking about firing people, executives, maybe even their CEO." Naomi's heart pounded. Orion Airlines had spent days trying to destroy her. Now their own people were turning against them. The next morning, Naomi woke up to a voicemail from an unknown number. She hesitated before playing it. A deep male voice filled the speaker. "Ms. Caldwell, this is David Lancaster. I represent a group of investors with major stakes in Orion Airlines. We need to talk." Naomi sat up fast. Investors. The people who actually controlled the company. Her hands shook as she replayed the message. They weren't reaching out to threaten her. They were reaching out because they knew she wasn't going away. She inhaled deeply, steadying herself. The battle wasn't over. But for the first time, Orion Airlines was on defense. And Naomi Caldwell? She was still standing. Naomi stared at her phone, the voicemail from David Lancaster still playing in her mind. "We need to talk." She had expected more threats, more retaliation. She hadn't expected Orion's investors to come knocking. The people who actually held the power in the company, the ones who didn't care about public statements or HR spin, they cared about one thing: money. And right now, Naomi's story was costing them. Her phone buzzed again. Tina. Naomi answered, barely getting out a hello before Tina launched in. "Orion stock is tanking," she said. "Shareholders are panicking. Some of them are calling for CEO Robert Ellison to step down." Naomi sat up straighter. "Wait, the CEO?" "Yes, he's taking the heat for how Orion handled this." Naomi exhaled. Good. Ellison had been silent since this started. He had let security handle it, let PR spin it, let HR try to buy her off. And now, he was the one under fire. "That's not all," Tina continued. "Sources inside Orion are saying there's another emergency board meeting tonight. They're trying to figure out how to stop the bleeding." Naomi let that sink in. She had started this fight alone. Now Orion Airlines was scrambling. They had tried to ignore her. Then they had tried to silence her. And now they were fighting to save themselves. "Have you called Lancaster back?" Tina asked. Naomi glanced at her phone. Not yet. Tina hesitated. Be careful with that. Naomi frowned. Why? Because investors don't care about justice, Tina said. They care about profits. If they're reaching out to you, it's because they think you're a threat to their bottom line. Naomi nodded slowly. You think they'll try to buy me off again? Tina sighed. Probably, but this time, it'll be for a lot more money. An hour later, Naomi sat in a private conference room at the Four Seasons Hotel, across from David Lancaster. He was in his 60s, gray suit, Rolex, the kind of man who had spent decades making billion-dollar deals over steak dinners. He studied her carefully, as if deciding how much she was worth. Naomi held his gaze, refusing to look away. Ms. Caldwell, Lancaster said smoothly, you've put us in a difficult position. Naomi raised an eyebrow. Me? He gave a thin smile. You understand how business works. Orion's stock is down nearly 8% since this story broke. That's millions in losses for our shareholders. Naomi folded her arms. I think the people who run Orion put you in this position, not me. Lancaster leaned forward slightly. We're looking for a solution, he said. Something that benefits everyone. Naomi didn't blink. And by solution, you mean paying me to disappear? A pause, then, yes. He said it so easily, so matter-of-factly. He wasn't ashamed of it. Because to him, this wasn't about right or wrong. It was about costs. Naomi kept her expression unreadable. How much? Lancaster didn't hesitate. $2 million. The number hit her like a punch. $2 million. Enough to walk away, enough to start over, enough to never have to set foot on a plane again if she didn't want to. She swallowed. And what do you get in return? You drop your lawsuit, you retract your statements, and you agree to never speak about Orion Airlines publicly again. Silence. Naomi felt the weight of it settle on her chest. This was so much bigger than the first offer. Because now Orion Airlines wasn't just trying to protect their name. They were trying to erase her entirely. She looked at Lancaster. You think $2 million buys my silence? Lancaster shrugged. It buys closure. Naomi exhaled, forcing herself to remain calm. She had a choice. She could take the money, walk away, or she could finish what she started. She tapped her fingers against the table, considering. Then she leaned forward. You want closure? She asked. Then fire Robert Ellison? Lancaster's jaw tightened. If Ellison goes, she continued, then I'll consider talking. She wasn't saying she would take the deal, but she was forcing their hand. Lancaster's expression didn't change, but she saw the flicker of calculation in his eyes. He hadn't expected that. He thought she'd jump at the money. Instead, she was making demands. Finally, Lancaster exhaled. I'll see what I can do. He stood, straightening his suit. I suggest you think about our offer carefully, Ms. Caldwell, because if you don't take it, this fight is going to get a lot uglier. Naomi stood too. It already is, she said simply, and then she walked out, leaving the deal on the table. That night, Naomi sat in her apartment, her phone buzzing nonstop. Then, a notification that made her heart stop. Breaking news. Orion Airlines CEO Robert Ellison steps down amid scandal. Naomi's breath hitched. It had happened. She had forced them to make a move. Her phone buzzed again. Tina. Naomi picked up. You saw it? Tina's voice was almost shocked. Saw it, Naomi whispered. This is huge, Tina said. Ellison stepping down? That means the board is panicking. They're trying to stop this before it gets worse. Naomi knew what she was really asking. What are you going to do, Naomi? Naomi gripped her phone tighter. She could still take the money. Or she could push further. She could make sure Orion Airlines was forced to change. Permanently. She could make sure this never happened to anyone else. Her pulse steadied. I'm not done yet, she said. And she meant it. Orion Airlines had tried to erase her. Now, she was going to rewrite everything. Naomi stood in her apartment, the glow of her laptop screen illuminating her face. The news of Robert Ellison's resignation was everywhere. Business sites, social media, even mainstream TV networks. She had done this. She had forced one of the most powerful CEOs in the airline industry to step down. But the war wasn't over. Orion Airlines still hadn't admitted wrongdoing. They hadn't issued an apology. They had sacrificed Ellison to protect the company. But the system that allowed this to happen was still in place. And Naomi knew what came next. Orion was going to fight dirtier. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ella, her lawyer. "Call me. Urgent." Naomi inhaled sharply, then dialed. Ella answered on the first ring. "Naomi, we have a problem." 30 minutes later, Naomi sat across from Ella in a private conference room at a law firm in downtown Atlanta. Ella's expression was grim as she slid a printed document across the table. Naomi's stomach dropped the second she read the header. Orion Airlines versus Naomi Caldwell. Defamation lawsuit. She clenched her jaw. "You've got to be kidding me." "They're suing you for damages," Ella said, folding her arms, "claiming your accusations caused irreparable harm to the company's reputation." Naomi let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "They're really going with that?" "Yeah," Ella said, "and they're asking for $10 million. Naomi felt her breath catch. This wasn't just a legal counterattack. This was a warning to anyone else thinking of speaking out. "They don't care about winning this case," Ella continued. "They just want to drain your resources, make you fight a battle you can't afford." Naomi exhaled slowly. She had expected retaliation. She just hadn't expected it to come in the form of a lawsuit that could ruin her financially. "They want to scare me," she murmured. Ella Asentio. "And if they can't buy you off, they'll try to bankrupt you instead." Naomi sat back, her heart pounding. For the first time, she felt the full weight of what she was up against. This wasn't just about justice anymore. This was about survival. The lawsuit made national headlines by the next morning. Orion Airlines sues suspended flight attendant for defamation corporation, fights back against allegations, claims no wrongdoing. Naomi Caldwell faces legal battle after CEO's resignation. Naomi scrolled through the articles, her stomach turning. Orion's PR team had spun the narrative perfectly. They were painting themselves as the victims, a company unfairly attacked by an employee trying to cash in on controversy. Her phone rang. Tina. Naomi answered, bracing herself. "This is bad," Tina said without preamble. "Orion is playing the long game. They want to drag you through court for years." Naomi already knew that, but before she could respond, Tina continued. "You need to go on the offensive." Naomi frowned. "What do you mean?" Tina took a deep breath. "We make this lawsuit backfire on them." Naomi sat up straighter. "How?" Tina's voice was sharp. "We take this fight beyond the courtroom. We get the public on your side before Orion can turn you into a villain." Naomi gritted her teeth. This was exactly what Orion didn't want. They had been trying to control the story since the beginning. But if Naomi could keep the pressure on, they wouldn't be able to control anything. Her pulse steadied. "I'm in," she said. Tina didn't hesitate. "Good," she said, "because we're about to make this lawsuit the biggest mistake Orion has ever made." The next day, Naomi walked onto the set of Good Morning America. She had been invited for an interview, live, national television. It was the biggest stage she had ever stepped onto, and she wasn't going to waste it. As soon as she sat down, the anchor, Michael Reeves, jumped straight into it. "Ms. Caldwell, Orion Airlines has accused you of defamation. They claim you damaged their reputation. What's your response?" Naomi kept her expression steady. "My response?" she repeated. "Orion Airlines damaged their own reputation. They pulled me off my flight without cause. They suspended me for speaking out. And now, because I refuse to back down, they're trying to ruin me financially." Michael leaned forward. "So you believe this lawsuit is about silencing you?" "Of course it is," Naomi said. "This isn't about the truth. This is about power. It's about a billion-dollar corporation trying to intimidate an employee into submission." Michael nodded, his tone serious. "You turned down a multi-million-dollar settlement from Orion. Why?" Naomi exhaled. "Because this isn't just about money. If I had taken their deal, they would have buried this. And the next time it happened, the next person might not have the same platform I do." Michael turned to the camera. "This case is already making waves across the country. Civil rights organizations are calling for a boycott of Orion Airlines. and legal experts say this could set a precedent for whistleblower protection in the workplace. Naomi felt the weight of those words. She hadn't just started a fight, she had started a movement. And Orion Airlines? They were losing control. After the interview, Naomi sat in the back of a car, watching her phone blow up with messages. Then one notification made her breath hitch. A message from an anonymous email account. Subject: "You don't know everything." Naomi's stomach flipped as she opened it. Inside was a single sentence. "There's more to this than you think. Look into security reports from the past 5 years." Naomi's hands shook. Someone inside Orion was trying to tell her something. Something bigger than what she already knew. She exhaled sharply. This fight? It wasn't over. It was just beginning. Naomi sat in her apartment, staring at the anonymous email. "There's more to this than you think. Look into security reports from the past 5 years." Her heart pounded. Someone inside Orion Airlines wanted her to dig deeper. Her fingers hovered over her laptop keyboard before she made a decision. She dialed a number she hadn't used in a long time. A gruff voice answered after 2 rings. "Caleb Pierce." "Caleb, it's Naomi." A pause, then, "Well, damn," Caleb muttered. "I was wondering when you'd call." Caleb had been a senior Orion security officer for almost 10 years, until he resigned under suspicious circumstances. He had always been blunt, always willing to speak his mind. But most importantly, he had access to files Naomi had never been able to see. She took a breath. "I need to know about past security reports. 5 years worth. Do you still have access?" Caleb let out a low whistle. "You really aren't playing around, huh?" "Caleb," he sighed. "Meet me at Benson's Diner in an hour." Naomi arrived at Benson's Diner, a small, rundown place on the outskirts of town. Caleb was already in a booth, nursing a cup of coffee. He looked up as she slid into the seat across from him. "You realize you're making powerful people very nervous," he said. Naomi folded her arms. "Good." Caleb smirked but didn't argue. Instead, he pulled out a flash drive and placed it on the table. Naomi stared at it. "That's 5 years worth of Orion security reports," Caleb said. "I don't work for them anymore, but I took my own insurance before I left." Naomi hesitated before reaching for it. "Why are you helping me?" Caleb's expression darkened. "Because I saw what they did to people like you, and I didn't stop it." Naomi met his gaze, seeing the weight of his own regrets. "This," he said, nodding at the flash drive, "isn't just about you, Naomi. Orion has been targeting employees of color for years. Quiet terminations, blacklisting. You were just the first one loud enough for people to notice." Naomi's stomach turned. She had suspected Orion was protecting itself. She hadn't realized how deep the corruption ran. She gripped the flash drive tightly. "Thank you," she said softly. Caleb nodded. "Be careful, Naomi. You've already pissed off the wrong people. This question mark. This will make them desperate." Naomi swallowed hard. Good. Let them be desperate. Because now she had the proof, and she was going to use it. Back in her apartment, Naomi plugged in the flash drive and opened the files. Her screen filled with reports, hundreds of them, employee removals, suspensions, terminations. A pattern so obvious it made her skin crawl. Orion Airlines had been systematically targeting minority employees. She clicked on a document titled Internal Incident Report, 2019. Her breath hitched. It was a list of employees flagged for security monitoring. Her stomach dropped as she recognized some of the names. And then she saw her own. She scrolled to the notes section next to her name. Monitor for future incidents. Do not promote. Naomi's hands shook. This hadn't started with her being pulled off that flight. They had been watching her for years. She slammed her laptop shut, her breath coming fast. They had tried to ruin her career before she even knew it. And now, she was going to ruin them first. Naomi sat motionless, staring at her laptop. Her name had been on a watch list. Not because she had done anything wrong, not because she was a security risk, but because Orion Airlines had decided she was a problem before she even knew she was one. Her phone buzzed. "Tina." Naomi snatched it up. "I have proof." Tina's voice was sharp. "What kind of proof?" Naomi exhaled. "Security reports. Years worth. Orion has been tracking employees of color, marking them as high risk. They've been quietly blacklisting people, denying promotions, pushing them out of the company before they could even fight back. Silence. Then Tina cursed under her breath. Naomi, she said, this isn't just a lawsuit anymore. This is a corporate scandal. Naomi already knew that. She had spent years working twice as hard, following every rule, thinking that if she was good enough, no one could question why she was here. And the whole time, the system had been rigged against her. Tina's voice was urgent now. We need to go public with this. Naomi clenched her jaw. We will, Tina hesitated. Are you ready for what happens next? Naomi let out a slow breath. They tried to erase me, she said. Now I'm going to make sure no one ever forgets what they did. The next morning, Tina broke the story. Leaked documents reveal Orion Airlines targeting of minority employees. Flight attendant lawsuit uncovers systemic discrimination at major airline. They were watching me for years. Naomi Caldwell speaks out. The internet exploded. News outlets picked up the story. Social media was on fire. Civil rights organizations were calling for investigations. Naomi turned on her TV just in time to see a CNN anchor reading one of the leaked security reports. Orion Airlines executives knowingly kept minority employees under surveillance, marking them for potential removal based on internal profiling systems. She felt sick. It was all out in the open now. Her phone rang nonstop. Lawyers, journalists, former employees who had their own stories to tell. And then, a name she hadn't expected. David Lancaster, the investor. She picked up. His voice was cold, clipped. Ms. Caldwell, he said, you just burned Orion Airlines to the ground. Naomi's grip tightened on the phone. Good, she said, because that's exactly what they deserved. By nightfall, Orion Airlines was in free fall. Stock down 22%, multiple executives resigning, federal investigators getting involved. Naomi stood in her apartment, watching the chaos unfold on live television. And then she saw the breaking news alert. Orion Airlines issues official statement, apologizes to Naomi Caldwell. Her breath hitched as the CEO's replacement, a pale, nervous-looking man, stood at a podium. Orion Airlines deeply regrets the discriminatory policies that were in place within our organization, he said. We take full responsibility for the harm done to Ms. Caldwell and other employees who were affected by these practices. Effective immediately, we will be cooperating with federal investigators to ensure transparency and systemic changes. Naomi's chest tightened. They weren't just acknowledging what they had done. They were admitting guilt. Her phone buzzed again. Ella, her lawyer. She picked up. You won, Naomi, Ella said. Naomi blinked. The words felt unreal. You won. For the first time since this all started, she let herself believe it. Naomi sat in a quiet corner of Beacon's Brew, the small cafe near the airport where she used to stop between flights. She hadn't been here since everything happened. Now it felt different. People glanced at her as they passed. Some recognized her. Some whispered. A few even approached, offering words of support. She wasn't just Naomi Caldwell, flight attendant anymore. She was the woman who took on Orion Airlines and won. Her phone buzzed. A message from Sasha. Turn on the news. Naomi exhaled, grabbed her tablet, and pulled up a live stream. A news anchor appeared on the screen looking serious. Orion Airlines has reached a historic legal settlement with Naomi Caldwell and other employees impacted by the company's discriminatory policies. Sources confirm that the airline has agreed to pay $50 million in damages and implement sweeping reforms. Naomi's chest tightened. $50 million. Not just for her, but for every employee Orion had wronged. The screen switched to a press conference. A lawyer for Orion stood at a podium. We recognize the harm that has been done, and we are committed to making lasting changes, he said. This settlement marks a new chapter for our company, one of accountability and progress. Naomi stared at the screen. They were finally admitting it, not just in a statement, not just in an apology. They were paying for what they did. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her father. She hesitated, then answered. Hey, Dad? Daniel Caldwell was silent for a second. Then, I'm proud of you, Naomi. Naomi swallowed hard. She had spent so much of this fight feeling alone, carrying the weight of it by herself. Now she finally let herself feel it. The relief, the exhaustion, the victory. "Thanks, Dad," she whispered. She wasn't sure what came next. She wasn't sure if she'd ever go back to flying, if she'd ever want to. But she did know one thing. She had changed something. For herself, for others, for every person who had been told to stay quiet. And that was worth everything. Naomi Caldwell's story isn't just about one flight or one lawsuit. It's about what happens when people refuse to stay silent. For years, corporations like Orion Airlines operated under the assumption that no one would push back, that no one would fight for accountability. But Naomi proved them wrong. She stood her ground. And because of that, real change happened. This raises an important question. How many other industries have systems in place that quietly discriminate, that rely on people being too afraid to speak up? And more importantly, who will be the next person brave enough to challenge them? What do you think? Have you ever witnessed injustice in the workplace? Let's talk about it in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories like this, real, powerful, and unapologetically true, make sure to subscribe, because this is just the beginning.